Hey, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are, good evening. My name is Ricard, coming to you live from Los Angeles, California, on March 377th, I think it is, on the year 2020 that would never end. Anyway, we are live at LP, doing LP Stories today, and welcome. Kind of here to talk about my path in this business, my life as a musician and as a human being. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things today besides drums. I'm a percussionist by trade, as you can see some of the stuff behind me. But part of my mission in playing drums is also to learn about history and my culture. So this is part of my journey, and I want to share some of that with you as well, if you'll indulge me. There's a way to chat with me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and I will do my best to answer from whatever kind of questions or comments that you have. And si habla en español también, yo puedo hablar español, puede preguntarme en español y yo respuesto, yo respondo lo mejor que posible. Perdón. Anyway, I was born in Santa Monica in 1958, January of 1958. Yeah, there I am, the baby. My nickname as a baby was 𝗟𝗣𝗙𝗘𝗦. 𝗟𝗣𝗙𝗘𝗙 means like cheeks, I had big fat cheeks. And now, I don't know how that came to be that my nickname was a Spanish word, because my family isn't necessarily, from any Spanish-speaking country that I know of. And I'll talk about that in a while too. But I grew up in a neighborhood that was mainly Black and Mexican. So I grew up with the language and around people, grew up with friends who were Mexican American and Black. Basically, that was my world. There were some white people in my neighborhood as well. Very mixed neighborhood, honestly. But my cultural influences or musical influences from way back then were like the music of the day: R&B, soul, rock, and mariachi, and rancheras, and son mexicano, all that stuff I grew up listening to as a kid and appreciating it. And I think that kind of took me into that world of the language, because when I did study Spanish in school, in high school, in college, I did really well in it. And I had the accent already from having grown up around it. As a kid, I wasn't a drummer. I didn't have any drums. I didn't know anything about drumming. However, my oldest brother had a pair of tack head bongos, I remember as a kid, and I used to tap on them every once in a while. He had a pair of drumsticks as well. And I used to kind of bang on those without any kind of concept of anything or any sparking any desire in me to be a drummer or a percussionist. But music was, as far back as I can remember, music was super important to me. I mean, I just gravitated to listening. My oldest two brothers were jazz fans. Like, they had all the Blue Note records. They had, John Coltrane, Miles Davis. They had Pharoah Sanders, all those, that era of jazz, the Blue Note era, and bebop stuff that they had. Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker. I listened to that stuff as a kid. And also my brothers also had Cal Tjader, a lot of Cal Tjader. So of course, then I'm growing up, even as a young boy, hearing Mongo Santa Maria and Willie Bobo, Armando Peraza, and Francisco Aguabea, without knowing who they were. I had no concept about them. But I guess it went into my DNA because it just was part of my growing up. My parents had Sergio Mendes records, Johnny Mathis records, and then my next two oldest brothers, I'm the youngest of 5 boys. My next two oldest brothers had a lot of R&B, doo-wop, and soul. So I grew up listening to 50s doo-wop, 60s soul, Motown, obviously Stax, Atlantic Records, all that stuff, you know, Ray Charles, James Brown, all that stuff was like, you know, it was air to me. I mean, I just was breathing all that in, and it went into my DNA. I know, because this was even before I attempted to play an instrument, really. And at the time that I did decide I wanted to play an instrument, for some reason I wanted to play the guitar. I don't know why. I was in the 6th grade, and I asked my dad if I could get guitar lessons. He got me a acoustic guitar, steel string acoustic guitar. It was very difficult to play. I had what we call action. That means the string is really high away from the bridge. So I was getting really calloused and beat up, but I was still playing, and I was determined to do so. So I started playing in the 6th grade. I was playing chords and scales. I took private lessons, and I got a better guitar along the way. So that was like the 6th grade, 7th, 8th grade. I was kind of playing guitar off and on, sometimes in church. I went to a Catholic school, so I'd play in the church. I didn't really know how to play much in the way of other kind of music, maybe a couple of rock songs at simple chord progressions. I learned from friends who were playing. And, you know, it was just, it was, I guess, my intro into the world of music as a musician, without really knowing what I wanted to do with it. So, you know, there's probably a bunch of photos they'll put up as of me as I got older, up until maybe 6th grade. That's me somewhere, I guess, around 8 years old. I'm not sure. It looks like Christmas Day. That's me in the 7th grade, when I played Pop Warner football. And when I blew up my knee, which ended all my sports career. So those years were kind of formative in terms of kind of finding out who I was, trying to find out my family history, and ask my parents, who weren't very forthcoming about our history. My family originates from Louisiana, Southern Louisiana. Baton Rouge is where my dad was born. My mom, though she was born in Gary, Indiana, my mom's family is from Jeanerette, Lake Charles. We got family in Opelousas, New Iberia, Lafayette. So my roots are in Louisiana, and that I think became a very important part of my musical career as well, because I was just trying to find out who I was. And my parents would say, well, you're Creole. Well, that didn't really mean anything to me. I'd ask, well, what's Creole? Well, it's French and Indian. Now get out of here. But what I would come to learn later, obviously, with that Creole is what people call themselves who are Black, maybe mixed with French, Native American, in Spanish, in different combinations. But always Creole, to me, what I came to understand, or what I thought I understood at the time, was that Creole people were kind of lighter skinned Black people, you know. And it was a tool to separate themselves from the rest of the Black society, you know. Well, we're Creole, we're not Black. So I disdained that. I discovered myself just not liking that very young, and didn't understand why and what it meant. Why I didn't appreciate that, because it's like you're trying to deny your own history. If you look into the history of Louisiana, it's a very strangled and troubled history of color, of separation by shades of color. Look up a thing called the paper bag test, and you'll see what you'll see what I'm talking about. If you were lighter than a paper bag, you could be in these social organizations. If you were darker, you could not. So that kind of mentality gets passed down through generations, and it kind of instills a self-hatred in that you don't want to acknowledge your heritage because you think it's something to be ashamed of. Well, I wasn't having that. So I was fighting that even as a teenager, early teenager. So by the 8th grade, this when I went to high school, the ninth through the 12th, I was, just going to high school, now the guitar kind of got put to the side. I was just, trying to get through high school in one piece, chasing girls, doing other things that I shouldn't have done back then, but I got through it somehow. And in that time frame, music still was a super important part of my life. I was discovering music. I think my cousin gave me a Stevie Wonder talking book album, and I think in the early high school years. And I was already a fan of Stevie Wonder, but that record kind of opened my head a little bit in that it made me think that music could be deeper than just dance. It can make you dance, but also you can make you think. And his messages were so deep that it kind of made me look at music in a different way. And by the 11th grade, I still hadn't really picked up the guitar again. I was sitting in the corner. I heard a record by a group that changed my life, which was Earth, Wind and Fire, and the album was called Open Our Eyes. And it was one of their most incredible records, still is. It was also a soundtrack for a movie that didn't do very well, but it was cool to see the movie back then. It's probably available somewhere. But the music was just unbelievable. And on that record, I heard an instrument that Maurice White was playing called the kalimba. And this is it. This is the instrument. It's a thumb piano. And actually, because of that record, I said, I don't know what, but I want to do something in music. I thought maybe I wanted to be a recording engineer. I had no idea. Then I started picking up the guitar again, and I wanted to play like 𝗟𝗩 𝗏𝗘, who was the guitar player in Earth, Wind and Fire. And then I asked my parents for a kalimba, and they got it for me for Christmas. So I've actually had this instrument since Christmas of 1977. And I hadn't used it for a long time. I used it on a Philip Bailey record a couple of years ago. Oddly enough, it came all the way back around to somebody who was on a part of Earth, Wind and Fire. But so by high school, I was thoroughly back into music. I was playing guitar again. I was starting to take lessons again. I was still not knowing what I was going to do, but it had to be a life in music. It just had to be. I didn't know what. Like I said, I thought I might be an engineer. So I right after I graduated from high school was the moment that changed the whole direction of my life. My brother said, my second oldest brother who lived in San Jose said, come and live with us for the summer, hang out, work, because you're going to have to work. You're going to have to do your own laundry. You're going to have to cook, learn how to cook, but you can stay with us the whole summer. And I was chomping at the bit to get out of my parents' house. My dad and I had kind of a fractured relationship, mainly around his internal, anger and self-hatred of trying to hide his heritage, our heritage. They carried with him forever. And so I was just ready to get out of there. So I left right the day after I graduated from high school. I went to San Jose to live with my brother for the summer, during which time I took my guitar and I took my kalimba. I brought this and my guitar, acoustic guitar. And so I was practicing. George Benson's record had just come out, his big seminal record, Breezin'. And I was like, okay, I'm going to play like George Benson and 𝗟𝗩 𝗏𝗘. And so I was, practicing a little bit, again, getting back into it, trying to learn the lines from George Benson songs and Earth, Wind and Fire songs. And during that time in summer, my brother, who went to San Jose State and was a teacher, became a teacher. He had a friend who was a drummer at San Jose State University, percussionist for the dance department. And his friend said, hey, I'm having a jam session over at a friend of mine's house. Going to be a bunch of drummers. Why don't you bring your brother over and tell him to bring his guitar and come jam with us? So I went over there, and literally there was probably 8 or 9 guys in this backyard, big backyard, with all these drums, congas, bongos, djembes, glass, Coke bottles, cowbells, whatever. And so I sat there watching this, and I was like, wow, this is kind of cool, but still didn't know what to do because I couldn't really play with anybody like in a situation like that. So I pulled out my guitar, played along, but nobody could hear me. I couldn't hear me because it was an acoustic guitar and it was all these drummers. Pulled out my kalimba, couldn't hear that. So I just sat there for a minute and I said, you know what, let me try this. Let me just pick, So I went and picked up a pair of bongos. I put them between my legs. And when I say that the lightning bolt moment happened, it was not an exaggeration. It was literally a lightning bolt. It struck me right there. I started playing. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was grooving. At least in my own mind, I felt like I did know what I was doing. And it just went through all the way down to my toes. And I was like, oh my God, I got to do this. I don't know how, I don't know where, that was it. That was the turning point. From that day forward, I had one direction, and that was music. Still not sure what I was going to do, but those drums were calling me, and I knew I had to do something with that. So I went back to Santa Monica in the fall of 1977, the fall of 1976, rather, and started college at Santa Monica College. I was walking, there I am. I was walking through the dance department, past the dance department in 1977. And there was this guy playing, this old, of all things, this old Jewish guy with a long white beard playing congas. And he was like playing 𝗟𝗩, marcha or whatever. And like what you hear in a salsa band. Like, wow, what, it does not compute. Anyway, I hung out. I said, hey man, what, I want to do this. And he says, oh yeah, my name is 𝗟𝗩. His name was 𝗟𝗩𝗙 𝗟𝗡𝗩𝗑. His father was an engineer in Puerto Rico when he was a kid. He lived there for years and years. And so he picked up the percussion. He played clave, he played martillo and bongos, he played congas. But his thing was maracas. And he called himself el rey de las maracas, the king of the maracas. And he literally could legitimately call himself that. The guy had chops. I mean, not just regular salsa chops, but he had all these tricks, almost like Venezuelan technique stuff. And he showed me clave, he showed me martillo, and he showed me tumbao or marcha, the basic pattern, the heel-toe pattern that you play when you're playing in the salsa band. Boom, I'm on my way. I just went to it like crazy. So I got, I just started collecting instruments. A friend of mine had a drum that lived 2 doors down from me. And I used to go over there and hang out with him, and I'd kind of hit it. This was in the 77, so late 76, early 77. February 77, he said, hey man, you want this drum? $10. It was a beat up old Mexican conga. I was happy as I could be. I got it, I took it home. That was my first drum. The next thing I had was some bongos, some gongbobs bongos. And then I started, gradually cowbells, little things like that. And then I was studying with my friend 𝗟𝗩𝗙. And then I met 2 people in Venice, because Venice Beach used to be a place where drummers would come congregate and play rumba and all kinds of stuff. Really great drummers would show up there. And there was a guy named Skip Burney and Daoud Woods, both from New York. and had studied with all the masters in New York, Gene Golden and Milton Cardona and Julito Collazo. And they showed me 𝗟𝗓𝗦𝗡, and they showed me rumba, and they showed me bembe, and they showed me, you know, all this stuff that I would have never, you know. I started learning how to play bata drums. All that stuff happens in the late 70s. I put together, I was, you know, studying, collecting records, you know, drumming. My, you know, parents were like, "What? You know, be quiet! All this noise. Why you gotta have all these drums in here? You know, what about the guitar? You know, you got your guitar, play your guitar." So I'm collecting drums and, you know, asking for money to get more drums. And they're like, "Well, you already got these drums. What do you need more drums for?" So it was a bit of a fight, but I got more drums. I got more congas, and I was playing in the room with the record player on and just sitting in there sweating, playing along with Santana and Cal Jader and Mongo Santa Maria records and Willie Bobo records. And, you know, any kind of swing stuff that had congas on it, I put that on. Some George Benson he had a swing record that had a conga player on it. And I was just, you know, learning all that, listening to everything I could get my ears on. And late 70s, I put together a band, a percussionist called Raíces de Ritmo, which was Roots of Rhythm. So the Roots of Rhythm, that was my band. And there were 5 of us, and we played all these different styles of Afro-Cuban and Brazilian and bomba and, you know, all these combinations of drums. So we were playing around town. I was playing for some festivals. I think there's a picture of me at the Dia de San Juan festival in 1979. There's 3 of us. You can see there's a couple people out of the frame, but that's 3 of us up front. That's Daoud Woods in the middle and Hector Serrano on the left, my left anyway, probably your left too. We were doing a guiro rhythm, you know, bembe rhythm with chequeres. And so I was playing around town, you know, doing programs for schools, because I worked at John Adams Junior High School in Santa Monica, and I convinced them to let me do a performance. And then, so I did things for the kids. I played at Santa Monica College in one of their afternoon concerts, and I was playing around town, festivals. And then I discovered, I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because I thought when I went to college I wanted to be a recording engineer. So I started taking early college, 76 through 80. I was, at the beginning of that, I was taking classes for record engineering, electronics. But I found that it was a little challenging math-wise. But and I did take a class at UCLA for engineering for you know, record engineering. And there in the late 70s, I discovered there was a group of musicians that UCLA put as part of their ethnomusicology department, a group called 𝗟𝗓𝗦𝗡. And so it was basically a salsa band, exploring all the different genres of Latin American music. And there was a guy going to college there named Danilo Lozano, flute player, great flute player, son of a legendary flute player himself, Rolando Lozano, who was part of oh my God, I can't think of the name all of a sudden. Legendary charanga group from Cuba. Anyway, God, for the life of me, I lost that thought. But anyway, Danilo was there, so I met him, and so I'm playing around town, you know, different things, and starting to go to the salsa, hang out in the salsa clubs, and wanted, you know, seeing people like Alex Acuna and Moñongo Jackson and Luis Conte playing in these salsa bands, and saying, I want to do this. I got to do this. So this is all like kind of happening in the late 70s, and in the early 80s, Danilo called me and said, "Hey man, I'm putting together this, reforming this old charanga group. It's an Afro-Cuban style of music with strings and flute and percussion section, like a salsa band, but with strings and flute rather than horns. It was an old band, actually, roots way back in Cuba, 𝗟𝗩𝗘𝗦 𝗟𝗑𝗓. And so he asked me to be part of that. And there I am. I was the timbalero. I'm the one with on the upper, in the lower picture, I'm the lower second from the right. And in the upper picture, I'm the second from the left on both sides, in the upper level of the second. So there's me. Playing with Latifah 𝗟𝗓𝗦 in the early 80s. I had a regular job at the time when he called me. I was working at John Adams Junior High School. I had a full-time job. And Danilo said, hey, man, we got 5 nights a week. Do you want to come do this gig? And we'll, I want you to play timbales. I didn't even have any timbales. He said, well, we're going to provide you with timbales, because the leader of the band had an old set of custom-made, handmade timbales, thunder timbs from Cuba, that were odd size shapes, shells. They were not standard size. And it was traditional charanga style, with the bell sitting on the skin and held onto the rim with a rubber ball. So the bell would actually touch the skin, and you play, the bell would resonate through the head. So that was my first introduction to the charanga. And of course, with all that rich history, I was exposed to, a whole lineage of great kind of music that I had no idea about. So that charanga, by the way, has its roots in kind of society music, because it used to be big orchestras with strings and clarinet and timpani. Well, the timpani got replaced by timbales. The only African instrument the first African instrument introduced into that ensemble was the guiro, the gourd that you scrape, because they didn't want any African instruments in these groups, and because it was considered profane. Imagine that. The music that changed the world was profane. So yeah, so the charanga kind of ended up becoming an ensemble with strings, flute, which replaced the clarinet, and the congas were added later to the ensemble. And that's where I was when I joined with Latifah 𝗟𝗓𝗦. That was more of that kind of an ensemble. So then I was playing around town in all the salsa clubs. There was some great salsa clubs back then. Virginia's, which was a legendary club that everybody played at, going way, way back to Tito Puente and Tito Rodriguez and Machito. Everybody played there. We used to play at Virginia's. We used to play at Candilejas, another legendary place. And I was just making my way around town, learning, more about the music, studying, practicing, taking lessons wherever I could, getting records. I did, that gig ended, and then I started playing around town with all the other salsa bands that were there at the time, the LA Salsa All-Stars. I was part of bands that would back up artists as they came through LA. I played with Tito Allen, I played with Meñique, I played with Hector Casanova, I played with there was a lot with Celia Cruz. I think there's a picture of me playing with Celia Cruz back in those days. I was playing bongos in that band, which was, God, that for me, that was like, I couldn't have been happier if you saw the smile on my face. I'm playing with Celia Cruz on, at a concert, a festival, excuse me. And I was just beside myself. So everything was, you could have killed me right there. Anyway, so I was playing around town, and right around that time as well, there was a singer, great singer, who was from Panama, named 𝗟𝗣𝗓𝗦. He played with, or sang with, Tito Puente. He was part of one of my favorite groups of all time, La Típica 73, Típica 73, one of my all-time favorite bands, most influential to me at that time, along with Ray Barretto and Fania All-Stars and a few other artists. But Típica 73 was just killing the game back then. And 𝗟𝗣𝗓𝗦 had left New York. I guess he went to France. He came back to LA. That was the second time, I think. And he was putting together his band, which is called 𝗟𝗣𝗓𝗦 𝗟𝗑𝗓𝗦. And so I was asked to become the timbalero. That's me there playing with kind of a sit-down kit with snare drum and kick drum. And that's Tony Rosa on congas and George Lopez on baby bass. And when I was in La Antillana, because there was a band called 𝗟𝗣𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦, a group from Cuba that was really avant-garde charanga, they were very influential to us, and we used to kind of imitate some of their music styles and actually played a couple of their songs. So that's where I kind of started practicing drums. I had a hi-hat, a kick drum, two timbal, snare drum, sometimes a snare drum in the middle, down below, and two cymbals. And so I was imitating the drummer from 𝗟𝗣𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦. So I had that kind of, we were kind of the first band in Los Angeles to really play that kind of what was called songo at the time. You know, you heard that from Los Van Ban. Changuito was the guy that kind of everybody looked to for that style. And so I was listening to Los Van Ban and 𝗟𝗣𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦. And so all that was part of my drumming experience as I brought it into Azuquita's band, because Azuquita would do some of the stuff that 𝗟𝗣𝗩𝗘𝗦 did, that he sang on some of the records. And some of that stuff had that kind of style on it. Nicky Marrero would play that stuff on the 𝗟𝗣𝗩𝗘 73 records. And I was imitating that. So I had that. And so when Azuquita asked me to be part of that band, I was thrilled. I mean, I did that for several years with him. And we played all over town, festivals and stuff. And so I kind of just kept doing that. So, you know, that was my kind of early days. Let me see, somebody just sent me a message here. Oh yeah, there is a clip of me playing with Azuquita back in the day, doing one of the songs from La Típica 73, La Botija de Abuelito. So you can kind of hear what I was doing, imitating the songo style. So this is Azuquita at Max's Cabaret in the mid-1980s. Anyway, you can you see I was incorporating some of the songo style drumming into my kit there. I didn't have my hi-hat like I would use with La Antillana, but that was a really fun situation. And so I played with Azuquita for several years. Meanwhile, I'm still doing other kinds of music, trying to kind of exploring jazz and, you know, pop stuff, but still like, nah, I don't really go into that way. I want to stick with where I grew up in this kind of music. But I was all the time I was practicing and listening and playing with other bands. So yeah, so that was those were some really formative years musically for me. And then one night I showed up to play with Azuquita with my full kit, like, you know, like what you saw there. And I get out of the car and I go into the club, and there's already another timbalero setting up there. One of my favorite players, Papo Rodriguez, one of my idols on bongos and congas in Los Angeles. And he was already up there. So I'm like, I'm not going to go up to him and say anything because I love this guy. I can't, you know. So I go up to Azuquita and say, what's going on? This is 1987. I said, what's going on? You called me the other day. I said, you know, he says, oh, you never called me back. I said, what are you talking about? I called you back. I told you I was going to be there. We talked. He completely forgot. I think he had some bad habits at the time. So I got my stuff back in the car. I was, you know, mad as heck because I needed that money, you know, to pay my rent. You know, every $50 gig added up to cover my rent, you know, which was cheap, of course, back then. But nevertheless, you know, I needed that money. So I was just so angry and so like, I'm so tired of this situation. Excuse me. And so I went home and I was just mad, and my roommate's like, what are you doing back here? I'm like, I show up and there's somebody playing, and you know. Anyway, I couldn't hardly sleep. I was mad all night. The next morning, I was talking to myself, I got to get out of this salsa scene. I'm tired of this salsa scene. I got to do something else. The next morning, literally, the phone rings, wakes me up, and it's my buddy Monyongo Jackson, who I'd, you know, been playing with and playing around and seeing, you know, we knew each other and would play together sometimes, and jam together. He said, hey man, I've been doing the Temptations gig, which he had been doing at the time. He says, man, I got to leave the gig because I forget who he was going out with. It was either Miles Davis or Diane Reeves or Joe Zawinul at the time. And he said, you know, I gotta split. You want to do this Temptations gig? I said, yeah. So that was Sunday morning. I got the call Sunday afternoon from the music director, Gil Askey. I met with him. Monday morning, I went to set up an audition for the Temptations. I auditioned. The next morning, Tuesday, they called me. You got the gig? Cool, beautiful. We leave Thursday. So 2 days later, I'm on an airplane for a 5-week run with the Temptations. My first, you know. Now I got the call saying I had the gig on a Tuesday. Part of the gig was playing timpani. I never played timpani. So that was Tuesday morning. I called my teacher, Billy Moore, who was one of my drum teachers, great teacher in Los Angeles. He had a school of music. I studied with him. I said, man, I got the Temptations gig. I got to play timpanis. I don't know what to do. So he said, come down. I'll give you a couple crash lessons, how to tune and how to play, get your notes, blah, blah, blah. That was Tuesday, probably afternoon. I think I did another one on Wednesday. I was still scrambling to get my stuff together to leave. 1987, February. That Thursday, I left. And that started a 2-year run with the Temptations. So I was gone for mostly 40 plus weeks a year for two years. And excuse me. Okay, just checking the chat. So that was 87 and 88, all the way up to February of 89. Now, that took me around the world. But the other thing that happened is I got my endorsement with Latin Percussion. I was on the road. I called the Latin Percussion, I think in late 87, and talked to Martin Cohen at the time, who was running Latin Percussion, and told him who I was, and you know that I was on tour with the Temptations, and I loved LP instruments, and I was interested in seeing if there was a possibility of getting an endorsement. I met with him. He said yes. We took pictures, and you know, I started my relationship with LP in 1987, and I've been with them ever since. And I can't say enough about the company. They've taken care of me beyond any, you know, desire that I could have imagined. So that was where I began my travels with LP, my connection with LP. So this is 87, 88. I'm with the Temptations. By the beginning of 89, I was done. I just was tired of doing the gig. I wanted to get out. I started training a friend of mine to take over. Angel Figueroa is a percussionist from Chicago, Puerto Rican brother from Chicago. And then I told the Temps, I'm done. I'm giving you my notice. So I left that gig, and that started a whole journey of other kinds of other musics, getting into other styles of music. I was kind of moving away from the salsa scene, although I was probably still doing some salsa gigs here and there when I was home. So that during like 1989, I auditioned for Paula Abdul, who was hot at the time. I didn't get the gig, but during the tour, the percussionist who was there, Rafa, great percussionist who used to play with Miami Sound Machine. Sorry if I can't remember his last name right now. There's just so many things swimming around in my head. But anyway, he had to leave because he was going back out with Miami Sound Machine. And so I got a call, hey, can you come join us on the tour? So I jumped on that tour with Paula Abdul. So that was the 89. I did that for a little while. And we were on tour with Milli Vanilli and Was Not Was, the MTV tour. And that was MTV, Milli Vanilli was out there faking it. and they did. We saw that they were faking it because their machine broke a couple times on stage that had all their vocals. But anyway, so that was 89. And then around 90, I started, playing with different bands. In the 80s, by the way, I also, one of the bands that I played with on a regular basis for a couple of years was a band called Talkback. I think there's a photo of me there playing keyboards with them. Yeah, this is in the mid 80s before I left with the Temptation. So I was playing keyboards with them, but I was playing, just basic keyboards. I didn't really know what I was doing. That was just a picture that caught me playing keyboards. I was playing percussion. We were signed to A&M Records, and the first record was going to be live, which was unheard of at the time. And we were also in a movie called Pretty in Pink, which was a huge movie back then. And we were in an early scene in the movie in a nightclub. So if you ever see that movie, it's in the first, 10 or 15 minutes, I think you'll see me in the background playing congas. But so I was already kind of, exploring other kinds of music, and one of the other bands that I was playing in the 80s was a band called 𝗟𝗣𝗦𝗘, which was with Rudy Regalado was the band leader. I think there might be a picture or two of me playing with them. Yeah, that's me playing. I was a bongo player. Michito Sanchez was the conga player, and Rudy Regalado was the timalero and the leader of the band. Big band too, which was a killing big band. And I really got to work out my chops on that band because its tempos were fast, a lot of reading. Great Oscar Mesa was the bass player and arranger and writer of that band, composer, and he wrote some very difficult stuff. And so you had to come with it. So that really kind of molded my, a big part of my growth in the 80s. So by the early 90s, I was starting to get calls for things. I was already starting to get calls in '89, and that's one of the reasons I left the Temptations. So one of the calls I got was for an artist, a great singer, one of my favorite singers on the planet, Diane Reeves. Manyongo had been doing that gig as well, but I think he had left to go out with Joe Zawinul. And so this is me with her, I think in Tokyo. We toured, we did dates in the US, and we went to Tokyo, in other cities in Japan. I can't remember back then. This is early 90s. Was such a great experience for me playing with her because she's a complete musician and a complete singer and almost a percussionist in her singing style. So that, to play off of that and have that interaction with somebody like that was incredible. And through the 80s and into the 90s as well, even as much as recently as the last few years, I played with Clare Fischer, who was legendary piano player, arranger, string arranger, who arranged strings for all of Prince's records. But he was really into Latin jazz. He used to play with 𝗟𝗩𝗘𝗦. So he had a Latin jazz band. So I was playing with him during the 80s as well through my friend Michito Sanchez, one of my bros from dirt. We go back to the beginnings of both of our, careers. So he kind of brought me into Clare Fischer band, and I was playing with him off and on through the 80s and at clubs around town, the 𝗟𝗣𝗙𝗘𝗦 and Le Café. And in those early 90s, Clare asked me to go to Europe with him for a tour. And that's me there playing with him, recording a live record with Clare and the Metropole Orchestra in Hilversum, Holland, in Netherlands. This was in the early 90s. And Ronnie Gutierrez was playing drums on that tour. And so that was a lot of fun. And so I did, I think, the early 90s, and then I got called again to play with him. This time, Tristan Bowden was playing drums, and we connected there. Tristan Bowden is a legendary drummer who played with 𝗟𝗩𝗘𝗦 and Kenny Loggins, and was the drummer for Chicago for probably close to 20 years. So that was all happening around the early 90s. And then, let's see, I did another tour with Clare, and then I joined Dave Koz, a saxophone player, for his record came out at that time in the early 90s, and he was touring the US on that record along with a singer named Phil Perry. So I did that, and that was a great tour. We had a lot of fun. We did a live videos, like VHS videos. For people who probably don't know what those are, but anyway, we did that, and then so that was in '92. He called me to do a second tour, and I declined. I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do something else. And so right at that time, since I had played with a band with Tristan Bowden, and I had played together with Clare, he recommended me to Kenny Loggins, who was getting ready to go out on tour. And so, and Tristan and I also played in a band with he and his wife called Cecilia Noel and the Wild Clams, which she's from Peru. So that was one of my early introductions to the cajon, the Peruvian cajon. And so Tristan and I connected musically. And so when this opportunity came up with Kenny Loggins, he recommended me. So I went to audition. I literally filled my station wagon up to the rim, to the very top. You couldn't even see out of the back. My tires were like, my back of the car was scraping the road damn near. I drove up to Santa Barbara. I unloaded all that stuff out. Kenny came in. He was getting ready to do a tour off of the record, Leap of Faith, and he wanted to use 4 percussionists, all of whom sang. So Vicki Randall, who was already there, a great percussionist singer, was already in the band, was there, and I was brought up to audition. I played, he came in, I played djembe for about 30 seconds. He said, okay, I see you can play. Okay, let's go sing. So then we were going to sing with Vicki Randall and 2 other people who were more singers than percussionists. And I was to kind of show them rhythm, parts to play. So we did that. That was '92. And I drove back home thinking, not knowing if I got the gig, but feeling really good about it. And the next day I got the call that I got the gig. So that was my beginning of my journey with Kenny Loggins. And really, one of my favorite bands I've ever been in. Freddie Washington on bass, Herman Matthews on drums, Steve George on keys, Mark Russo on saxophone, Guy Thomas and was on guitar at the time. And we toured and had some incredible moments. We did a live concert video, live at the Grand Canyon. And then Kenny put out a children's record, which I played on that. And then he was putting together a live record called Live at the Redwoods. So we did a live video and a live records on the campus of UC Santa Cruz. And it was one of my favorite records I've ever played on. Mayongo Jackson was there with me playing percussion, and there was other percussionists in and out of that on the recording and in the video. But it was a beautiful setting. The night, it was a warm night, one of those magic things. It just like incredible. So I think there's a video queued up of outside at the Redwoods, which was a concert video and an album, a live album. And this is a song called Leap of Faith that Kenny did. Kenny was very, very open to percussion. So, you know, you see me there playing batas on the stand. You know, it was a really cool moment. There was a lot of great music on that record. And that record actually did surprise me in that people that I met all around from all over the world said they saw the video and had that record, and that they really were, you know, influenced by what I did, which I was shocked. I mean, some of these players that I met through the years, they're like, well, wait a minute, these guys were like my idols. And they were like, man, that stuff you did on that record. But you know, you never know how you're going to touch people in whatever ways, you know, that you approach music. And so as much as I was getting touched and moved by them, I discovered that they also dug what I was doing and how I was incorporating my roots into the kind of music that I ended up getting into, which was, you know, Kenny Loggins and, you know, Clare Fischer and Diane Reeves and all these people. So that was those were some really great years with Kenny, 92 to maybe 96. And then I kind of left the band, but kind of came back in for a minute. And I'd since done other things with Kenny off and on. But I just want to talk about you know, the way that culture inserts itself into, you know, our modern society. I mean, as you saw, I was playing a very ancient drum, a bata drum from Nigeria, from the Yoruba people, a drum that is used to communicate and as part of ceremonies celebrating the different deities of the pantheon of deities in the Yoruba religion and faith, right? So there's, you know, here we are with Kenny Loggins, the farthest away from any of that you can imagine. But however, you know, I took a rhythm that seemed that it might work with this, and, you know, put it in there, and here we are connecting the ancient and the modern, you know. And to be honest, I mean, the music that Kenny was most influenced by in his singing style is very Black. You know, his singing style is very soulful. He was influenced by a lot of R&B and blues and soul singers, you know. So somehow or another, all that stuff kind of comes back around and distills into other kinds of, you know, expressions. So, you know, that was a really telling example of that. I mean, that those drums were not being used in a religious setting, and, you know, but they fit, you know. So in the 90s as well, the early 90s, I forgot to mention that I played with a band called 𝗥𝗏𝗏. They were an American band who were very popular in Europe, and Tristan Bowden was the drummer on one of those tours as well. And that, between the Sicilian Oil and the Wild Clams connection and the 𝗥𝗏𝗏 connection, that's how Tris came to recommend me to Kenny, because he had just left the gig right before that in the early 90s. And so I toured Europe with 𝗥𝗏𝗏, and we played all over Europe, France, where they were really big, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, places like that. And that was more of a rock band. And they wanted, you know, heavy percussion. And Luis Conte had done the records, And 𝗞𝗘𝗩𝗘 Sánchez, I think, had done a tour or two. And when another tour came up, Luis Conte recommended me for it. So I think both Luis and 𝗞𝗘𝗩 recommended me. And I went out with 𝗟𝗩𝗏𝗘. Now I'm in Paris, just hanging out because we were doing a concert. And right up the street from where we were playing was another theater. And I see that David Byrne is playing. And that was the time that he was doing the Afro-Brazilian thing. And he had Margarete Menezes singing, and he had Marc Quiñones and Milton Cardona playing percussion. So once I saw that they were playing, I beelined it up to that theater and somehow got backstage, made my just hang out and just watch them play and, you know, watch them sound check or whatever. And I think there's a picture of me, Milton Cardona, and Marc Quiñones in Paris playing bata drums back in the early 90s. I mean, to sit down with a master like Milton Cardona, one of my idols, who played on some of the most influential records for me, the Grupo Folclórico y Experimental records, and played with, God, everybody, with just Ruben Blades. I mean, his list, but also he was a folkloric drummer. So for me to sit down with him and Marc Quiñones, who was and is one of the greatest percussionists in the world, at that time was like, you know, I still, you know, can't believe that happened. So anyway, so, you know, these are kind of all the things that I was doing in the 90s. I did, after Kenny, I got a call while I was doing, right after I left Kenny, I started playing with 𝗟𝗩 𝗦𝗡, the trumpet player. He had a Latin jazz band. Oscar Cartaya was the bass player and music director, and he was and Herb was doing a Latin jazz thing that he wanted like full percussion section. So 𝗞𝗘𝗩𝗘 Sánchez, who played on the record, Marc Quiñones played on the record but couldn't do the tour, so I got the call, and Walter Rodriguez were the percussionists on the band. Walter played drums, and 𝗞𝗘𝗩 and I were on either side playing a multiple percussion setup. So we toured Europe and the US and Canada. And in Europe, we were on the same bill as Steve Winwood. And my buddy Wilfredo Reyes Jr. was playing drums with Steve Winwood at that time. And Martin Verdonk was playing percussion. And we were on the same bill. It was a great concert with Herbie Hancock and us. I mean, it was Youssou N'Dour all on one bill. Of course, it was Europe. You couldn't do that here. But I went up to Wally. I said, man, if this gig ever stops happening for Martin, if this gig opens up, please call me. Well, sure enough, Martin left to do something else. And Wally called me and said, hey, you know, you want to do this gig? So that's 97. So I'm playing with Steve Winwood now. And Steve was a huge fan of percussion. He let me and Wally do a full percussion segment, like 10 or 12 minutes long, maybe more. We went through bata, we went through bomba, rumba, you know, songo, everything. We got to play everything in our segment. It was just the two of us on stage. And that was like an amazing situation. So that was a US tour, 97. And at the time, I was starting to think I wanted to kind of plant myself in town to do more other kinds of musical endeavors, maybe, you know, more record dates, more film dates. So right at the time after let's see, how did I get that? Oh yeah, so right after that tour, I was playing in town with Cecilia Noel and the Wild Clams with Tris. We played around town. Great drummer Terry Lynn Carrington came to that gig that night, and she came up to me and said, hey, I'm doing this gig on TV it was called Vibe. It was a show called Vibe. It was hosted by Sinbad. It was a Quincy Jones production. It was a late night talk show. And the music director was Greg Fillinganes, a legendary studio keyboard player, band leader, musical director, Emmy winning. This guy's like incredible. And so she said, hey, are you interested in doing this gig? Because �ប៉𝗘𝗩 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗑𝗦 is leaving to go do another show. And I said, sure. So I went, met with Greg. I got the gig. So that was my first kind of introduction to television, which is where I ended up living the world of TV from kind of then on. So I started that relationship with Greg Phillinganes as well there, which has lasted to this current day. I mean, we were as recent as last year playing in Saint-Tropez with for Magic Johnson's birthday party concert. He had a big concert in Saint-Tropez, France. So there's a picture. Hey, look at that. That's me. That was our stage. Incredible. Really incredible. So Greg and I, you know, connected there, and he used me for a lot of different shows and concerts and things over the years. But that 97, we did that show. It ended. Right at that time, when I got the gig when I took the gig with playing on the Vibe show, Steve Winwood called us and said, hey, we're going to South America and Central America. Do you want to do this tour with us? You know, we're going to do this tour. And I said, I got this thing, TV thing. It was right at the same time, and I had to decide. So I chose to stay home, and I'm glad I did. It was the best choice I ever made. I kind of always followed my instincts in this business, and I'm glad that I did, because it always kind of served me well, and that set me on a path for television. So during all this time, I'm starting to get more calls for doing records and films. I think there's a couple of pictures of me doing recording sessions back then. This is probably, I don't know if this is a studio, this might be a live gig, but that's me doing a film score for a session for Chris Beck, great composer who I did all the Hangover movies with. I don't remember what film this was, but I did the Peanuts movie. I think there's a picture of me playing a little joke picture with Snoopy. We were at the film score session for the Peanuts movie. So all these things are happening during this time. So this is the late 90s, early 2000s. Late 99 or 1999, I get a call from Ricky Minor, whom I met in Tokyo in 1988. He was music director for Whitney Houston at the time, and I was with the Temptations. We did a jam session at some studio with a bunch of other musicians. And Ricky Minor there on the right side, that's Sting in the middle. We were doing a TV show. This is probably mid-2000s. But Ricky Minor called me in 1999 and asked if I wanted to do this TV show called Motown Live. It was a weekly TV show. And so yes. So I'm on doing TV every week, buying all these great artists, R&B, pop, R&B soul artists at the time. And so that's where my relationship with Ricky really started in terms of working relationship. So, he would call me for TV shows and one-off TV shows and things, and from then on. So this is all happening in this period. I think I can't, the years are kind of all mixing together there because there's a lot of stuff going on. But at that time, I also got called to do a tour with Lionel Richie. So this is 1999 as well. And with Lionel, I auditioned, I got the gig. That's he and I backstage later at the Tonight Show when I was part of the Tonight Show band. But we went to Europe and toured the US, different dates in the US. But one of the most important places one of the most incredible places is a place that I'd been already, actually, when I was in the mid-'80s. I used to work for an airline. I went to Egypt. And but one of the places we toured to was we went to Cairo to do a concert outside in front of the pyramids. And that was a picture I forgot to send in. But there's a picture of us on stage with the pyramids and the Sphinx behind us. And you're talking about a moment of just like incredible, you know, in a place that's, yeah, you can't even describe the feeling. But so we played there, and that was 1999. And that was up till the beginning of 2000, New Year's Eve, 1999, going into the 2K. Remember Y2K? We were playing in Las Vegas to bring in the new year, and Lionel pulled me and a couple of singers aside and said, "Hey, man, get ready. We're getting ready to go on the road for a big tour. We're going to be, you know, we're going all over the world. You know, just get ready." Okay, we're ready. So that was New Year's Eve, 1999. I went to the NAMM show in January of 2000, walking around and everybody's like, "Hey, you guys are coming to such and such city. You coming to Chicago, man, get me tickets." I said, "Well, for what?" He says, "Well, you're with Lionel Richie, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah, Tina Turner and him are doing a huge tour." And I'm like, "What?" I didn't know anything about it. So I leave out of the NAMM show and go call the music director, excuse me, call the music director. "Hey, man, what's going on? You know, I thought we were, you know," he says, "I don't know. They fired him, didn't tell him. They fired me, they didn't tell me. They fired the singers, they fired the bass player." You know, it was like a wholesale changeover band. And I was like, you know, devastated, because it was a huge arena tour. Anyway, so that didn't happen. But about a month later, Ricky called again Ricky Minor called me again to start doing other TV stuff. And that was like nonstop from then on. One of the things I did in the early 90s was a show called American Idol. And I ended up doing about 12 seasons, I think, or 11 seasons. That's a later picture of me playing on American Idol. But before, there's Carl Pedazzo and I playing on American Idol, probably the finale. I imagine Santana was performing. And but before I started playing on American Idol with Ricky, I got called to do a session, a couple of sessions. This is the second season, I think, for American Idol. And it, you know, I did maybe 2 shows. I forget who was doing percussion regularly then, but I did a couple sessions, and I got, you know, a few weeks later, I got a check in the mail. I was like, wow, this kind of pays okay. This is all right. So let me, you know, but that was just some random sessions. The next season, which was season 3, I got called to do a session because Luis Conte, who had been doing it, I guess, was the beginning of the season. I guess he was scheduled to do it, but Luis was doing everything at the time, and he just couldn't make that session. I mean, he was probably doing 3 or 4 sessions a day at the time. So he bailed on that session, and I did the session with the music director, Nigel Wright. It was all pre-recorded then. There was no live band. This is season 3. And I did the session, and at the end of the session, the contractor came up to me and said, "Hey, he wants you to stay for the season." I'm like, okay. So that was my beginning of American Idol. Now, this was before Ricky took over. Myself and Paul Jackson Jr., the guitar player, who also was on part of the Ricky Minor's band for all those years, and who also was part of the American Idol band when Ricky took over. He was doing the sessions with me, but it was just he and I, and then an orchestra of strings, horns, other players. And it was really, really, really challenging because he really tried to have to get everything in one take. So I was really kind of doing the octopus thing, you know, bells and congas or foot pedals, tambourines, electronics, all that stuff. I was starting to explore all that because I had to get as much done on the first take as I could. So we did that whole season. That following year, Ricky Minor, or the end of the year, Ricky Minor got called to do the American Idol Christmas special. And then right after that, he was announced as the music director for the new season with a live band on stage. And that was my beginning of my journey on American Idol. So we were there and doing that for a long time, for up until 2010, when Ricky got called to be part of the Tonight Show band. But he was basically got the call to be a music director with the existing band. But he said, listen, my success has been with my band. If you want me, you got to bring my band. So he brought us all along, which was amazing. So all these years, you know, I'm doing, during all these years of doing American Idol, that lasted 4 months out of the year. But I was doing records. I think I played on Marc Anthony's record, 𝗟𝗩𝗘𝗦 La Pena. I think there's a picture of me and Marc Anthony in the studio. I played with Natalie Cole on one of her records. That's me and her in the center, and Paul Jackson Jr. on the right. I played with Dave Koz on one of the Dave Koz's records in the 2000s. That's me with Johnny Mathis at Ricky Minor's studio recording on Dave Koz's Christmas record. So you know, all these things were happening during these years. And so the 2010 was when we switched over from being the Tonight Show band, American Idol band, to the Tonight Show band. Now that was a big jump for all of us. We went from, you know, this just was one of the most incredible jobs I've ever had. And literally we left American Idol on a Wednesday, or I think a Thursday. And the next week we were already started on Tonight Show. And that lasted for 3.5 years. It was a great run, full-time gig, TV every night, you know. And, you know, but all this time as well, we would still do other TV shows. So we were doing, you know, on our breaks, we'd run out and do some TV show back east, you know, or there was all these different one-off TV shows. We'd still do the Grammys or the Clive Davis Grammy party, which we'd been doing for a long time. And during all these times I was playing with Ricky, I was also doing stuff with Greg Phillinganes, other TV shows. So there was a lot of stuff going on musically. And, you know, so that kind of is kind of my journey up to where I got to, you know, with Ricky doing more and more TV, and he's, you know, and Greg doing more and more TV, and they both, as a result of their work, have both won Emmys. One of the shows that Ricky won an Emmy for was a great show that I was really honored to be a part of. It's called Taking the Stage, which was celebrating the grand opening of the Smithsonian, the Museum of African American History and Culture at the Smithsonian. So there was a TV special produced by Quincy Jones and Oprah that Ricky was the music director for. And we backed, you know, we were the house band for everybody. And I think there's a short video of one of the segments of that show with us playing with Herbie Hancock. This was the part of the TV show Taking the Stage. I think you have a video of Herbie Hancock. Yeah. So this is us playing at the Kennedy Center, celebrating the grand opening of the Museum of African American Culture and History. And this is us backing up Herbie Hancock. That's me kind of right up center behind Herbie. Great honor to play behind a man like this. Anyway, this was such a great show to be a part of. I mean, I can't begin to even to say what an amazing experience this was. So all these things are happening. I'm experiencing all these musical moments, but tied to all of what I do is the desire to understand my cultural background and my cultural history. Like I said, my family was not really forthcoming with my Afro-Cuban or African heritage, rather. There may be some Afro-Cuban heritage in my family that I don't know about because of the Louisiana connection. And I was always searching and trying to learn more about the drums and where they came from and the origins and the history. So that is equally a part of what I do, because to play these instruments with such a rich history, you have to talk about their history. And, so I'm trying to learn as much as I can. I had the opportunity to go to Cuba in 1995 with Cecilia Noel and the 𝗟𝗩 I think there's a couple of pictures of me playing. Might be one picture of me playing sitting in with a group called 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘, 𝗟𝗜𝗩𝗘, great rumba group. We are, I'm not sure if she has that queued up, but I might have passed it. But there's a picture of me with the legendary 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗡, which is one of my also percussion idols. This is 1995 in Havana, Cuba. We did a concert with Cecilia Noel and the 𝗟𝗩𝗪𝗡 and a group called 𝗟𝗜𝗡. And 𝗟𝗩𝗪 was also sitting in with us and with 𝗟𝗜𝗡 as well. So I got to meet him, one of my percussion idols. There may be a picture of me jamming in the street in Havana, sitting in with 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘. I don't know if that picture is there or not, but so all these times, all these years that I'm playing and practicing and trying to learn, I'm trying to understand history and how convoluted our history can become. One thing I want to share with you is that American music in its entirety, and I do mean in its entirety, came through New Orleans. New Orleans and the surrounding areas of Louisiana were the source for blues, jazz, funk, soul, rap, all those, rock and roll was all created incubated in New Orleans. It spread out, it moved. There was the whole Mississippi Delta was a rich source of music. The southeastern coast of the United States was also a rich source of music for the music that became American music. If you talk about American music, you have to go through New Orleans. Now, the other important part about New Orleans is and still is and was the most northern port in the Caribbean. It was part of the Spanish Empire at one point. So, there was all this interaction between Cuba and Havana. So there is the kind of music that you hear in New Orleans has that they call the Latin tinge or whatever. There's music called like the Mardi Gras Mambo, that style of music. There's Mardi Gras Indian music. All this stuff sounds very Caribbean and very African. So those, you see how that thread runs through, and that stuff runs into all of what became American music. So I'm always trying to find and study that thread, and I always emphasize that to people that I know that who want to hear it, is to understand that this is not just a drum. You got to pay attention to you're practicing. Yes, you have to understand how to play the drum, but if you're going to play a drum like this, you got to know where it came from and how it got to where it is. So, for me, it's just always been a very important part of what I do. So all that being said, this instrument behind me, to my left, is the cajon, and this instrument, which I discovered with playing with Cecilia Noel back in the the 90s, or even the 80s. I think I started seeing it and hearing it, but I really started playing it, with Cecilia Noel, and studying Afro-Peruvian music. Became a super important instrument for me, in that I was starting to take it to use it on recordings of other kinds of music. I played on a Kenny Loggins record called The Unimaginable Life, and the drum kit in the first part of the song was me on cajon, with hand percussion. So I'm using this instrument in that kind of setting. I'm doing a TV show called The King of Queens. So I did 7 seasons of that, where there's no drums. It's still in syndication. You can hear it still if it's a show in syndication. It's just me, a bass player and a guitar player, and during which I'm playing cajon as the drum kick snare vibe, and then I have a table, like this percussion table behind me, full with truck parts and springs and pipes and pieces of trash and metal pieces of weird little pieces of metal that sounded like something, and that was the drum kit. So this instrument is getting into me in a way that I couldn't know and understand, but it was becoming part of my musical surroundings. So this instrument became really, really important to me, and I was always trying to interject it into what I do. So with that in mind, I want to talk about, we'll stay on this thread of kind of a cultural connection. If you'll indulge me a little more, I know I've been talking for a long time, but I'm going to bring in 𝗟𝗣 from Latin Percussion. He's the artist relations rep, and we're going to talk about the drum, particularly the cajon, but also what it means, and maybe talk about how this instrument has kind of become so important to all kinds of music. So anytime you're ready, Jerry, come join us, and let's talk. Hey, man, can you hear me? Hey, brother.
I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, man. Good to see you too. Good to see you, brother.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, for taking the time to spend with us and share your journey. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys, man, for taking care of me. Thank you guys for taking care of me for so long.
Anytime.
So
very cool. Yeah. So yes, please. We'd love to hear your insight and the cultural significance of the cajon and what it means to you. And please, maestro.
Seemed to, oh, there we are. We kind of fell out there for a second. So the cajon. So this instrument is, I'm understanding, is that it was, this, as we see it now, was developed in Peru, probably in the late 1700s, maybe even earlier. Maybe you might know more about that than I am, Jared, being Peruano. But my studies have said that there, even maybe as late as the late 1600s, that this drum had already had its shape. So this was an instrument developed because at time when the Spanish were ruling the empire, drums from African people who were enslaved and brought over to the quote unquote New World were not allowed to be played well, because they knew that they could communicate. So they said, no, you can't play your drums. So what did they do? Well, they were offloading boxes from ships, right, with codfish and candles, and offloading furniture from Europe. And so this instrument, kind of became part of that. They turned the box over and made an instrument out of it, correct? So to me, that shows the power of culture, because you cannot deny, you can take the drum away, but you're not going to take away the rhythm, the spirit, and the cultural significance that comes with it. And what this instrument represents to me is that distillation of that. It's the perfect example of, hey, you cannot stop. You cannot stop me. I will take a drawer out of a shelf, out of a cabinet, and turn it into a drum, which is what happened, right? And so, yeah, for me, this instrument is so important, and I've been really, really proud to have played it for so long. And as a result of me performing on American Idol with 𝗟𝗏 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦, which I think there's a video somewhere, but I don't know if we queued that up. I can barely hear you sometimes, Jerry.
I think I'm not sure if Jules might have a video of that, but I do remember seeing that video. Yeah, and it's phenomenal. I mean, that was, what year was that? That was
probably 2005 or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
2005 and 6. Yeah. And it changed everything for me. Go ahead. Cutting in on you.
No, I was going to say, like, at that time, I think, like, still the cajon wasn't as popular as it is today. I think it's been kind of growing still since. It's still it's the go-to drum too, for many different kinds of genres of music too.
Yeah,
which is amazing.
Sure has become. Yeah.
Which, by the way, your cajon is a workhorse, which I love. I mean, a lot of artists love your cajon, and they love the sound of it and everything. But aside from that, it's just, it's a go-to. Everybody loves it.
Well, but I'm really honored.
Yes. Well, it's incredible to see that that this instrument that comes from something that was, I wouldn't say, well, it was something that happened in history that should have never happened, you know, but to see this transition from something negative to positive, you know, and how the instrument, like you said, it's incredible to see the this instrument just now being used for every genre of music, to the history that it had, which is, wasn't a happy one. It wasn't one that
based in
should have happened.
Strife. Yeah, based in strife.
Exactly.
And because the drums were banned, they would, they'd just carry the boxes, and and then they'd sit on them and play them. And then when they show up and say, well, what's going on here? Well, we're just sitting around, taking a break. So that's the genius of culture and determination to get to that point. So anyway, so let's go back to this video. This was American Idol. 𝗟𝗏 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗘 was performing, and she wanted to do this without a full drum kit. So I suggested bringing in the cajon, and Ricky said, okay, let's do that. So me and Teddy Campbell, the drummer, both had cajons, LP world beat cajons, which were made by the Cortez family in Spain. And this is what we did. And this was on American Idol, which was the most popular TV show in the world at the time. So you can go ahead and play that.
3, 4. Well, my heart knows it better than I know myself, so I'm gonna let it do all the talk.
So
there it is.
Well, anyway, you get to see a little clip of that and see. Now, imagine this. I mean, the drum was already well known, but that show was watched by so many people around the world at the time. At least 40 million people were watching in the US, and then it was broadcast all over the world. Now, so this happens, and then all of a sudden, LP is selling cajons like crazy, and they're like, "What's this instrument?" And I was like, I didn't realize what a thing it became, and it really took off. They started selling literally container loads of cajons, and they couldn't keep up at the time. So as a result of that, and my use of it on American Idol and so many other shows, I was offered my own signature cajon, which I was, so honored to receive. It wasn't something I asked for, but this is my Kevin Ricard custom signature cajon, and I'm really thankful for that moment. And I didn't realize how, I've heard it being said that was a really important moment in the widening the knowledge about the cajon, but I didn't really know about it until last year when I did an event for Latin Percussion Dealer Days event, and all these dealers, when I was there and they were talking about introducing me afterwards, all these dealers were saying, "Man, I saw that show, and right after that show happened, everybody was coming in asking us to buy cajons, and they wanted to know where that drum was and how we could get it." So I guess I played my little part. I'm thankful that all these things led me to that moment. But now the cajon, man, I mean, like you said, it's taken off. Everybody is getting into it. And it's not just because of me. I can't take that credit. No, 𝗟𝗣 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗑 was a big part, and probably the major exposer, the person who exposed that drum in the U.S., I think. But it just happened to be one of these whimsical moments that it happened that I'm being watched by the world, and everybody loves it, wants to get this drum. But 𝗟𝗑 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗑 is probably the guy we look to as one of the guys who introduced it in the U.S.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I mean, so this drum, I mean, it just, there's versions of cajons in Cuba. There's versions of cajons all across the Caribbean. Some with these kind of things on it, but bigger ones. There's an instrument called the marimbola, which is basically a cajon with the big tines on it to play, which is like a bass kalimba. But the Peruvian connection is where it kind of, I think it really kind of distilled in Peru and the dancing style, and the playing style was where it kind of took that journey to all parts of the world. I mean, it was already simultaneously happening in Cuba, but that was a different style of music. It was rumba, and even used for sacred music. I saw a 𝗟𝗑𝗩𝗘 with cajons instead of bata drums when I was in Cuba. Yeah. So, but I mean, the instrument has really, really, really taken off. And I mean, there's so many versions of the cajon now. I mean, people are making. Oh, yeah. I mean, this drum right here is a Ghanaian Panlogo, which usually has.
I was gonna say, what is that?
That's a Panlogo drum that has usually has a skin with pegs and strings pulling it down. But the Motherland Music, great music store, drum maker here in town, they took the head off. Anyway, so there's so many versions. This is more like a Cuban style quinto box, which we use in rumba. And there's like maybe a pair of bongos out of wood. So you got all these different versions of an instrument that started here from strife and pain and the enslavement of African people. All wherever they went, they brought culture and music along with them. And even when the drum was taken away, had to play, had to make music some kind of way.
Absolutely.
And something I just discovered recently. I mean, I knew there was a huge Afro-Mexican culture in Mexico, obviously, and I didn't know that they had their own cajon. Yeah, they have a cajon there called cajon de tapeo, which is played with a hand and a stick. And I haven't seen any videos of it yet or audio. I'm looking for it.
You got to check that out. No, okay. You know what? But we got to pull that up next time. But that's
I just found out about this.
Yeah. Oh wow.
So, yeah. So they have their own cajon. It actually looks like maybe like the Peruvian cajon, but turned on its side so that the playing surface is on the top. You play with a stick and a hand. Now,
Oh, wow.
Mexican music is, again, you know, because of people being made to feel bad about themselves, Mexican music also plays down the deep and heavy influence of African music. Huapango, the word,
Yeah.
sounds African.
Yeah.
You know, all the Veracruz music that came, you know,
Veracruz.
from all the, yeah, Veracruz is the source. The dancing style with the you know, the feet playing on
Very
the,
similar to the zapateo. That's true.
exactly. The zapateo in Mexico and in Peru.
Yeah. In Peru.
And then you see in Spain, you know, the flamenco, you know, they're all connected.
Yep.
Now,
It all connects. Yeah.
yeah. And now there's one other connection that maybe people didn't know about. In the southeast of the United States, on the Georgia Sea Islands, there's a 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘 culture. And because there, at one point, again, drums were taken away, what did they do? They turned the floor into the drum. So these they had a church. In their churches, there was no there was no instruments. It was just dancing and singing around in a circle. And the churches were purpose built so that the floor was resonant. So that was the cajon. And they dance and play very African sounding rhythms. The McIntosh County Shouters are a group that still maintain this tradition. That's over 300 years old, by the way. So that's another example of the cajon, but on a grand scale. The entire church is the cajon. You know?
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I've seen some of the tarimas, you know, before, but having a whole floor like that's incredible. I would love. I mean, I can imagine the sound, the acoustics of that, you know, and the energy as well.
Yeah,
it's got to be incredible.
Yeah, so that's a you know, again, you just have these examples of culture rising up through any kind of way of trying. You can put asphalt over everything, but somewhere along that, and
some grass will grow.
Somewhere along there's going to be a hole in the grass, or a tree's going to come out of there, and that's what culture is to me. It always springs forth, you know. Absolutely,
that's beautiful. The last time I saw you, we were hanging out. We went to go see 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘 play in. I think it was in L.A. That was a really cool experience to go see a show like that, and of course, 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘 in this style of playing, but the dancers as well and everything that they were doing, just incredible. But that was the great hang as well.
Yeah, for me to see that instrument played at its zenith. I mean, like the very highest level that you can play that instrument between 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘 and Diego El Negro Álvarez. For me,
Diego.
those are my idols on the instrument now. Of that style, you know. But then there's the Campos family in Peru, and they're legendary cajon and percussionists, you know, from Peru. So, you know, those are like these are the guys that influenced me, you know, and that Alex brought that to here with him when he came to the States. So I mean, I'm grateful that I have this instrument. I don't consider myself el cajonero del mundo or nothing like that, but I do think that I have done justice to the instrument. No, I mean, I think I brought, you know, I've done justice to the instrument in terms of bringing it out to other places. But for me, when I watch somebody play, I want to see Diego Álvarez or 𝗟𝗩𝗦𝗘 or Alex play the instrument, because they to me represent the very ultimate expression of the instrument. But I'm really honored that instrument has taken me places that I could have never, ever imagined. And go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, well, you've elevated that status, so you know you've really put it out there, and so you know so many people when they see that for the first time, they feel inspired. So everybody's doing their part, and that was a huge role that you played. So thank you so much for putting that there and for putting the cajon in the spotlight, you know, and letting people know what this is, because if nobody knows about it, nobody will want to pick it up or even learn how to play it. So thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. So, you know,
well, man, thank you guys for you know, having this drum, having this drum out for me and with my name on it, it's really an honor. I don't know if there were anybody who had anybody who had questions for either of us on this chat. I'm looking here, but I don't see. What was that African drum? Cajon de tapeo, T-A-P-E-O, and there's another name for it. Let's see, I have it list here. Tapeador or cajon de tamboreo. Yeah, cajon de tamboreo, but cajon de tapeo is one name. There are pictures. There's a book called Afro Mexico, which I actually just ordered. I haven't gotten it yet.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, to learn about that, because so much of the mariachi music is based on Afro-Mexican rhythms. 6/8. Again, a place where the drums were taken away, and okay, we're going to use our feet. We're going to play on the tarima. We're going to play on the stage, and beat out the rhythms there. And then they transfer the rhythms to the stringed instruments, to the harp, and to the vihuela and the guitarrón. So you got all these, it's like again, it just never, you can't tamp it down. It's going to come out, that culture, that strength of that culture and the history of that culture is always going to come out. So, yeah. So any other questions anybody has, please feel free to put them up. If oh, this is my brother Fausto. What's up, man?
Fausto.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I enjoyed your thing too. Jackie Bertoni. Hey,
Jackie Bertoni.
My brother. What's going on? But yeah, I just, my life journey in this music is not just being a musician. And I want people to understand that it's not, yes, I'm a musician first, because that's how I make my living. But it is the way of me expressing my cultural heritage, which for so long I didn't feel in touch with, or was not allowed to come in contact with until I reached out and grabbed it. And so, that being the case, I have to always explore the history and the culture behind all these instruments. I mean, I could take up the rest of the afternoon doing that, and I know people don't want to sit here and listen to that, but I do want to, always emphasize that that's something that is important. Yeah. So, okay. So, I guess we're getting ready to wrap it up. Jerry, thanks for joining me. If was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, thank you, Kevin, so much once again, and for taking the time and sharing your journey. And I guess we're all learning still. So everybody's learning, and now more than ever, it's a great opportunity to pick up an instrument, play, and like you said, recommend some great books to read and learn about the culture and the history. It's very important. So I appreciate your taking the time and doing this and sharing all that information with us.
All right. Well, thank you, man. I guess I'll sign you off, and then I'll sign off to the rest of the people. Good. We'll talk soon, my brother. All right. So listen, hey, we're all stuck at home these days. Music, for me, is the only thing that is keeping my spirits, in a positive direction, because we are certainly being faced with a lot of crazy stuff right now. And the fact that our industry and the way that we make our living as musicians is shut down from all sides, it's difficult. So, keep playing music, keep listening to music, keep reading about music, and please, just keep your head in music, keep your head to the sky, as an old Earth, Wind, and Fire song said. It's one of my, that's the thing has kept me going. And I've been writing music, trying to, get original music out, and I think, you know, as we should all do, is try and create. There's a link to my SoundCloud. There's some of my original compositions there. Some are more cinematic in their direction, and some are more song based. And I'm working on new stuff right now. I'm going to be putting out probably a EP or CD later on, probably early part of 2021. Jesus, what year are we in? It just won't end. But anyway, I hope this has been insightful for people to be a part of, and I hope I shared something that helped you to understand about this drum, and I think why it's an important thing to know about, besides just play it. And I think the next one of these is that's coming up is with 𝗟𝗣𝗩 𝗟𝗑𝗦 on December 10th. It's the next chapter of this LP Stories. You need to tune into that, because that dude is the truth. He is everybody's drum idol, you know, and I'm not just talking about conga players. I know he was a big influence on me and continues to be. So yeah, make sure you tune in for that and check out all the other ones. I know Fausto has one, and Wilfredo Reyes has one. dwdrums.com, Drum Network. Check them out. Go on to YouTube, LP Stories. And again, thanks to LP for being with me all these years, supporting me along my journey, and for my signature cajon that's done well for the company, as well as bringing a wider awareness of the drum to the world. I'm glad to have played my little part in it, and just keep making music. And I hope we get through this all together, come out on the other side healthier and sane, because right now this is insane. Anyway, love to everybody. Keep hope alive. Keep your head to the sky. Keep playing drums. Keep hitting. Keep making music of whatever kind of instrument you play. And I'll see you along the way. All right. Signing off.